Hello, my name is Doug Goodkin, and you are listening to the ABCs of Education.
A, you're adorable. B, you're so beautiful. C, you're a cutie full of charm.
Today's episode is titled Between Education and Catastrophe.
F, you're a friend in my arms.
Here I introduce the theme of this podcast and why I chose it. And the title comes from an H.G. Wells quote, "We are in a race between education and catastrophe." Think about that for a moment. When was the last time you had a serious conversation about education? That you read a book about it, or bought a magazine, or listened to a podcast? Every day for some 12 to 15 years, parents drop their kids off at school, but how much do they think about what really goes on there? In our national discourse, everyone's talking about the economy or technology or the latest app or this crisis or that crisis, but how much do we hear about schools? In the recent vice president debate, the subject did come up briefly, and the brilliant suggestion from one of the candidates was that we get stronger locks on the doors. Really? Is that the best we can do? And I just filled out an election survey about what issues I'm concerned about, and out of 15 different choices, things like healthcare and immigration reform, creating jobs, no surprise, schools and education were nowhere to be seen on the list. If we don't talk about it and we don't think about it, and we just keep going on with business as usual without thinking about how the business is actually doing, then catastrophe wins the race. And there are plenty of signs that it is. Our new unspoken national motto seems to be, "My ignorance is as good as your education." Here in the United States, we are graduating people from universities who literally don't know who won the Civil War. People who can't distinguish a fact from a fantasy and don't care which is which. People who are eating a daily diet of misinformation and disinformation. People who will rarely read a book in their adult life. People who are addicted to a steady stream of trivial nonsense on their phones and can't imagine taking a walk in the woods without checking their messages. And these people are empowered to vote. At a crucial time, when we need more intelligence and more caring and more culture, books are being banned, and teachers' jobs are on the line if they tell the truth to students. I visit a lot of schools, and everywhere I go, I see signs on the school walls that say things like, "Practice mutual respect, be kind, work hard, work well with others, knowledge is power." Well, how are we doing? Look at where we are. We say the words, but we're not delivering the goods. There's signs everywhere that schools are failing miserably, and I'm not talking about low test scores, but failing miserably in the mission of cultivating thinking, caring, and responsible citizens. So that's the bad news, but there's plenty of good news. And that's what I want to focus on in this podcast. One of the books I published in 2006 is titled The ABCs of Education. It took everything I learned about teaching music further out into all corners of a school's curriculum and community. I wrote about 26 things, one for each letter of the alphabet, that good schools and good teachers already are doing. Things that could refresh education if more people consider them. Things that would create a happier present for children and a happier future for us all. And with our country's interest and obsession with talking about education, the book became a national bestseller. Yeah, just kidding. in my dreams. But I'm trying again with this podcast. Nevertheless, I persist. It would really be so simple to reform education. All you need to do is gather all the teachers from all the great schools and ask them, how do you do this? By great schools, I mean places that have created and sustained a community where children feel welcomed and valued and cared for, where they're trained to think critically and given a firm foundation in reading, writing, arithmetic, and yet more, where they're introduced to music and dance and drama and poetry and visual arts, not merely as consumers, but as makers of art. Such places make a difference in both the present and future life of their students, and those students go on to make a difference in the world as we would wish it to be. This is not mere dreaming. I have testimonies from over 1,000 kids I've taught at a school that contributed enormously to who they are and who they became. These kids give me great hope and remind me that if education is to surpass catastrophe in the marathon race, we better start talking about it, and we better start thinking about it, and most importantly, we better start acting on it. And so here we are. Again, my name is Doug Goodkin, and welcome to this podcast, The ABCs of Education. For those of you who don't know me, here's a little background. I was a kid who loved learning and didn't love school. And though I didn't have the language for it yet, some part of me knew there must be a better way to do this. So I got my revenge by becoming a teacher, and I worked at a progressive independent school for 45 years. I started the music program at the San Francisco school, based on the Orff approach to music education. We'll find out more about that later in the podcast. And after 1 year of teaching, I also began to offer workshops for teachers. And that grew into training teachers in some 50 countries worldwide. Teaching kids and teaching teachers turned out to be the perfect way to do both better. I had to think about what I was doing and how I was doing it and why I was doing it. And that led to a lifetime of reflection, writing articles for journals, that led to publishing 10 books on the subject, that led to a TED Talk, that led to giving keynote speeches at various conferences, that led to a 13-year-old blog still running titled Confessions of a Traveling Music Teacher, that led to a documentary film made about my last year of teaching in 2020 at the San Francisco school, The Secret Song, now streaming on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and PBS. Check it out. I'm doing what I can to push education more into the mainstream of our national discourse, and now this podcast. And just who is this podcast for? Certainly teachers of all kids of all ages and parents of kids or grandkids who are going to school. But since we're all in this race between education and catastrophe, I say this podcast is for everyone. Because what happens in schools today affects us in all sorts of ways. And it certainly affects us tomorrow if we fail to deliver to kids what they need to be happy and healthy, kind and caring, intelligent and imaginative, especially in a democracy that depends on responsive and intelligent participation. So let's take a little trip down the 26 letters of the alphabet and see what we can do to revive and refresh education. Knowing, as Will Rogers once quipped, schools ain't what they used to be, and they never was. We can both affirm what many schools do well and dream further into what they could do better. And since one of my cornerstone principles of education is direct participation, here is an optional assignment for you. Imagine that you had to write a book about what you hope schools would have been like for you, or could yet be for your children, and come up with one idea for each letter of the alphabet. Things like A is for appreciation, and please don't say A is for AI. B is for books, C is for creativity, etc. Press pause, sit down and write your answers from A to Z, and then come back and I'll reveal the first 6 chapters of my book and then continue from there. Go! Okay, welcome back. How did that go? I imagine X might have been difficult, maybe Z also, but it'd be interesting what you came up with. Here are my first 6 chapters. A is for art, B is for beauty, C is for character, D is for democracy, E is for education. That might seem odd. You'll find out why I chose that when we get there. And F is for fun. So welcome again to this podcast. I'm looking forward to 26 and more episodes with you. And just to be clear, I'll be reading some things from my book, but also commenting about what's going on right now. And I'll try to be clear as to which is which. And so off we go.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right.
All right.
What's more?
What's more?